Well, welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
And to the right of me, or down the middle, is supposed to be Tim Wade, but he's a no-show so far on the No Show. Or at least, there he is. Hello.
Hey, I'm Tim Wade.
Yes, and I'm Joe Augustine. Welcome to the No Show. It's a show that tries to get a more well-rounded perspective on all kinds of issues. And today I think we're going to try something a bit different as well. Usually we go through a whole bunch of things, covering a whole lot of things. This time I think we're going to stay a little bit more focused on our main topic. And we always want to have a diverse viewpoint on things and a relevant viewpoint on things. So for that, we have with us our fourth member of the No Show today, Brigadier Sushil Basin, who's had some 34 years with the experience with the Indian Army, since retired, and I think onto a speaking career. Welcome along, Sushil.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm so happy to be on this show.
We're happy to have you.
And I'm glad that it's the KNOW show and not the NO show.
That is true. Consonants are important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sushil, do you want to give us a little bit more background about who you are and what you've done in the past as well as what you're doing now?
So I experienced military leadership in the Indian Army for 34 years. I started with the infantry, where I was there for 5 years, and then due to some medical reasons, I shifted into the logistics corps. So most of my time, means about 29 years, went into logistics. In 2004, after spending 34 years, my love for children and my exposure to education made me shift, and I prematurely took retirement to transform people's lives. And for the last 19 years, I've been using my military leadership experience in the business and corporate leadership, as well as in the educational leadership. So that's what I'm into. And it's only, I kept doing training all these years, but speaking came to me only in 2008, when I realized that there was another completely different thing called professional speaking. And that's how I've landed up with APSS and PSAI, and I'm so happy that I did that.
Nice. All right, so should we sort of set some context about what we're going to talk about today? So we're obviously going to be attempting to tackle a very big topic. How can we secure our future if we cannot secure peace? And really, this isn't about the war between Israel and Palestine. It's a much bigger topic, although, of course, we're going to be talking about that. So before Hamas attacked Israel, did you guys know that the state of war and conflict in the world was equivalent to pre-World War II? Were you aware of that? Yeah. So we're already sort of moving into some pretty serious times from a war perspective, and we can't take this moment lightly and think everything is fine, even though it looks like a lot of the world is carrying on like with business as usual. We've moved into a very tense and dangerous time. So that's what we wanted to do here today, is really sort of talk about various aspects and what's going on, and looping some of the bigger stories together. So I figure the best place to start is just maybe our impressions of what's been going on. I'm happy to kick it off unless somebody else wants to go first.
Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So for me, these last few weeks have been pretty interesting. So when Russia invaded Ukraine 18 months ago now, I was really beside myself for months, because I look at everything through the layer of climate collapse. So everything that's happening and all the decisions that have been made and the wars that are happening, I look at it through that lens. So it gives me a very different perspective. And back at that time, I was just in shock, that we could even be possibly thinking about this. And it was such a dangerous step for humanity to be taking, and I just thought, how can we be so stupid when all of our focus needs to be on restoration of the natural world? So 18 months later, here I am. I'm not going through that same grief process, because I'm almost resigned to the stupidity that we're seeing around the world. But when Hamas attacked, it all sort of happened so quickly. I think the whole world was in a state of shock because, how could this happen to Israel? Israel, of all the nations on earth, that could suffer something like this. And then the stories obviously started to come out, and they were horrible, terrible, disturbing stories of atrocity, and we were seeing the worst of humanity. Hamas, the way it behaved, it was brutal, ugly, and based on their actions, they obviously have no desire for peace at all. And, how can you negotiate with people who are capable of such acts? And, they weren't even pretending to hide it. They were putting it up on social media. So, but I think one of the things is because everything happened so quickly, we didn't have time to mourn with the Israelis. I don't know if you remember post 9/11, because 9/11's been used a lot, and I don't think it's an equivalence. But I was in America at the time. I was in Boston. There was a deep time of mourning in America after it happened, before the next things happened. But I think this is having a very, very deep impact on the Israeli and the wider Jewish community, especially the people I'm connected with, and they're expressing a feeling of being very, very alone and unsupported right now. Even when our governments from our own countries are supporting Israel and its right to self-defense. But the individual Israelis are not feeling that they're getting that support from us. And we are also seeing that in the actions and protests around the world. So obviously when this all kicked off, it obviously started up a global conversation, and the rockets started raining down on Gaza rapidly. And today, I think it's more than 5,000 dead. It could be higher now, and at least half of the dead are children in Palestine. So it's opened up yet another divide in the world, and everyone is once again screaming at each other, but no one is listening. There's also an incredible amount of ignorance out there in both the media and on social media, and we're all being rammed with people who don't actually know what they're talking about. So Here we are. It's true, right? Here we are facing this potential of escalation, which could result in an explosion of death across the Middle East. And this is something we just can't allow to happen. We have to find the path to peace. We have to, because this has the potential to take us all down. So peace is our only path forward. I think people who are not on the extreme end, left and right of politics, we are the majority, and we've got to come together. We've got to bring our world together. Otherwise, if we don't, we're just going to be hastening our demise. So that's kind of my initial sort of takeaway of what we've seen in the last few weeks. Tim, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think I'm frustrated about the response. I'm frustrated about people taking sides and then using this for their political agendas. That's what I and they're taking sides from a I don't mind people having an opinion and having a political bent, I suppose, in one perspective, but this was not an escalation of a conflict. This was a terrorist activity, quite a very clear terrorist activity that demanded a some sort of response, and we can debate about whether or not the response needed to be the way it was, but I don't know whether that's going to necessarily help. And my concern is we've had such a period of, and depending on where you are in the world, you will reject this comment, but such a period of global peace. Yes, there's been national confrontations across borders and things like that in lots of different parts of the world. There's been some atrocities in areas of Africa and Asia as well. But from a global level, this second major conflict that we've seen, it's dangerous because of who are linked to Israel and to Ukraine in particular, from a who their allies are with and who that could trigger actions from. So the First and Second World Wars, a lot of the other countries came into it because of the deals with regards to alliances that they were forced to enter into those sorts of conflicts. And those alliance deals now, it's just, we're on a bit of a precipice. And I share your concern with regards to the climate side, because any sort of climate statement or presentation right now will find its way not even probably in mainstream news. It'll be relegated to something very backburnery, or not even on anyone's agenda at all, because this is the topic du jour. So I'm I'm concerned, but peace and conflict have been two sort of opponents for millennia, and this is I guess what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Joe?
I've been concerned about the expression of opinions without enough context and without enough knowledge.
Yeah.
It's not just about expressing the opinion. It's about the I would say harsh, pointed, very partisan kinds of responses, which have come from I mean, surprising quarters, and also in terms of I think in terms of tone deafness, some of it has been quite incredible. You know, like I mean, when I heard about the letters, the letter that was signed by all these Harvard students, you know, and what they said about things, it had to be something that was almost, to me, it's just impossible to know about how horrific the actions were to respond to it with that sort of with that sort of thing. I mean, that response isn't the kind of thing that goes along with the happening. You know, it's a tragedy. It's certainly on both sides. Certainly, everybody has taken losses, and there's some. It's just bizarre that is what we think is appropriate at this time. You know.
Are you talking about the letter that the Palestinian supporters at Harvard wrote?
Oh, yeah, they basically. Well, basically, what it is, they put the blame of the whole thing on Israel. As in, like, you know, after the incursion and all that happened at the beginning of it, not just after all the responses. I mean, in terms of context, if this had come much later, maybe I would think that it built up and got to the point where maybe that response might be appropriate. But this response was right at the start, when basically, you know, there was a surprise attack, and there were all these people that were injured, you know, and not just injured and killed in horrific ways. To have that response come out in terms of a letter, that was you know, that it was just surprising to me that how people are willing to do that. I don't not understand people's feelings about it. I do understand. There are a lot of people I know who had their feelings about the conflict and tensions in the area, and I know where they stood with their sympathies. But I think there's a difference between having a political view on things and then having a response which is, to be honest, inhumane, if I'm allowed to say that. I know that's going to be contextually it's a dicey word to use, because there's so much action that's come out of this which can be deemed as inhumane as well. But, you know, for people who are not involved in the conflict, the inhumane responses, that's just something that's been bothering me.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to add to that. The other thing that's really been bothering me about it is my thinking has moved to, what does this mean for our voice, and how our comments, a dinner party comment, for example, or a dinner table comment that we might make, may be like, oh, well, no, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion about it, and then you may leave that dinner party with a different opinion because you get to hear it. But when you're making these decisions online, it's there forever, and it's like people are losing their job and all of that sort of stuff. There's such a unforgiveness with the technology in the world at the moment that some young kids may not be realizing how much damage they're doing to their future with a possibly poorly thought out or ill-conceived signature. And yeah, so that's the other thing. And then, of course, the response that came in with the doxing, I just thought, that's really interesting as well, from how this is being funded to silence people. So I don't, regardless of whether or not their comments were inhumane, just that heavy-handed silencing from in kind of an appalling way, because you'd take somebody aside, you'd say, look, I don't really think that, tell me a little bit about, let's have this guy, I think you should remove your signature from that, rather than the billboards on backs of trucks going through the college with your photo on it saying you're an anti-Semite, for example. So I'm not supporting what they said. I'm just not endorsing that response to something that needs counseling, not shaming, because shaming will usually solidify a position rather than help consider an opinion to then educate and then move people forward to go, how can we deal with this in a sensible way rather than in a confrontational way, because that's still confrontation. We're dealing with confrontation, and there's got to be a better way.
I'm going to pull up an article just a little bit later where we're going to be talking about, sometimes it's all right to shut up. That's the point, that seems to, like the lack of thought in putting positions out there with so little knowledge and awareness of the long history of a region, that has been struggling. So Sheil, it looks like we've got lots of people who admire you have joined us today, and they're saying hi in the comments. So we've got Ramiz, Anil, Team BSB. I think that's what, I can't see some of the other names, but anyway, so Sheil, yeah, exactly. I know you've been traveling this last week, so you might not be on top of everything that's going on at the moment, but what's your takeaway so far of what's been going on and how it's being handled?
So thank you, Andrea. Thank you for getting me on this show. What I would say right in the beginning is that even though I got into the army, I went into a military school when I was just 10. So I can say that I have a military mind. But even while being in the army I would say in that case, if I use my school and my NDA training and all, it would be about 42 years. And even in those 42 years, while I was in uniform, I always had a very peaceful mind. I thought that the army was necessary, but fighting was not necessary. And I always, had this question that why do we have to, as human beings, fight with each other, kill each other, and be so inhuman when we can coexist peacefully? And to the extent that I was on the border in J&K, there's a place called Punch where a lot of fighting takes place between India and Pakistan. And in that, my daughter, in summers, they allow families to come in. And my family had come to this post, we call it the forward post, from where there was a military military soldier talking about, explaining where Pakistan is and where India is. And my daughter was in class 6 and she wrote an essay saying, God never divided a mountain. That mountain belonged to the humanity. And why are we saying that half of that mountain is in Pakistan and half of it is in India? With that mindset of peace, I'm saying that today it pains me to see why people, after so many years, this one thing you said in the beginning, after all the advancement, and we are so proud today to say that we have advanced technologically and this and that, and we are so proud of man going on the moon and all. But what is the use if we are back to pre-Second World War stage when it comes to the unrest in the world? It's of no use. All these achievements fall flat when we have not been able to grow as human beings. That is a big question in my mind.
Yeah.
So I see that today, all that Tim and Joe have said, and very, very, very interesting facts that they brought out. Look at this information war that is going on. The war where intelligence and social media is being misused to an extent to pollute people's minds and draw them into certain things, draw them into a trap of uh, biased opinions and meet their political agendas. And
Mm.
this has become such a dirty game. So all I say is that, yesterday I was in Singapore and I was at the Temasek Polytechnic, and I was standing and talking to the senior manager there about the UN sustainability goals. That was a big board there, and that was one of the emphasis of that department. And I've been speaking on UN sustainability goals at various occasions. On one hand, we have an agenda to create a climate of peace, and on the other hand, we are diverting our attentions into killings. And what has happened recently, whether it was in the Ukraine war or in the present Hamas Israel war, is total inhuman. How can you do these things to ladies, children, little children who have not even uttered the word dad in their life have gone? I mean, how inhuman is it? So
Yeah.
that is my initial take on what's happening right now.
Yeah, no, it's sad. So you were talking about misinformation, and I think that's a really, really important topic because it's not for me. It's misinformation and trust. They go together. So I don't know if you guys remember us talking about this a long time ago, but when the Ukraine war started, a global team of information trackers sort of formed. They weren't even employed. And basically, what they did was making sure that the information that was being used about the war between Russia and Ukraine was correct. And they were and basically they became a major source for the media around the world. And it's basically they've been incredible, right? But in Israel and Palestine, we just don't have the same level of clarity. Now, it could be because Israel is notoriously secretive, especially with its information. But the amount of misinformation being shared is really, really crazy. So, for example, I'm following this one guy on Twitter who's every day sharing misinformation that's being spread. And one example is a video that's been shared and millions of people have been looking at it. But it was a video of Syria 6 years ago. So this person's working really hard to make sure that it's not misinformation isn't being accepted. So a big story, obviously, in the last few weeks was the bombing of the hospital in Gaza. Now, apparently, from what I understand, Israel claimed responsibility and then deleted the tweet. That's my understanding. But by this time, the whole of the Middle East and the world was in uproar. But then some other possibilities came to light. Maybe it was a Hamas rocket that misfired and landed on the hospital. But because there's no transparency and no trust, whatever actually really did happen may never be believed. Even with countries in the West backing it up, like the UK has put out a report saying it was a Hamas rocket. The US has put out a report, but they're not being trusted because they're on the side of Israel, right? So, but the lack of trust is a real risk in this war, and it's where escalation can definitely happen. And you kind of wonder, we've got an opportunity here. How do we bring the parties to the table? How can Israel bring people from the Middle East in to be watching the decision-making process? And I know that's a big call, but we've got to do something about the mistrust and the misinformation that's being shared, because I think it's a very, very dangerous challenge. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
You're muted, Joe.
I like to step in and say here that when technology is used to manipulate and use your agenda to divert people's minds and pollute people's minds and take them away from reality, is something that is very, very dangerous to humanity in the long run. And if we are looking at peace, that is devastating, and it is more destructive than anything else. Now, information exists, and information is normally confused by people as intelligence. So, information and intelligence are two different things. Information exists in bits and pieces. Somebody needs to connect them. And then there's a process of assessment and analysis. And when you analyze, then you come to intelligence. When these people do all this, they do the assessment, they do the analysis, and then create a false picture and pollute people's minds, that is what probably is happening across every conflict that's happening. And that is more dangerous than the war itself, because the destruction that is happening because of the war, whether it's lives, it's material, it's buildings, infrastructure, everything is going for a six. But the seeds that are being sown in the human minds across the world, thousands of miles away, people don't know that place, they don't see that devastation happening. But what they are made to feel, particularly by these organizations, is something which is of high concern.
I like that distinction between information and intelligence. Joe?
I was going to say, I'm not sure if you can really do all that much about it, because we're the core of it is human beings, right? Everybody, a lot of the stuff that happens, in fact, if you look at how information spreads or misinformation spreads, it's actually people doing what they think is a good thing. They're not there usually trying to misinform. I mean, the source, the author or the creator of it, maybe looking for attention, may have nefarious intentions, whatever it is. But usually, what it lives on, or what it is propelled by, actually are the good intentions of people after that. So someone who thinks that this is a horrible thing about a truth that needs to be spread, and therefore they push it on and they carry it forward. And then what happens? The next step is, of course, then doubling down. And once you've said something and you've believed something, it takes a lot to help you to. It takes a lot for you to say that no, I was wrong about that. That's completely not right. And then to maybe even say that I was fooled into it, and then you just can't catch up with it. So I feel that as far as information goes, there really is no winning, because there is no way that you're going to say that this is absolutely the truth. The line for credibility is constantly redrawn. I mean, like, even if you talk about the social media people in Ukraine, right? I mean, the thing about that is they're accused of, and it's believed as well, that they have some bias, because whatever the truth happens to be, it's conveniently going to be in someone's favor. It's never going to be just like a totally balanced shit show. It's going to be, it looks like someone did something more, something less, and then you go like, well, then there's a good chance that there's some kind of conspiracy going on. That's the problem with it. So it's a case of really Russia winning its big play for way back in the 70s. I mean, the whole idea of misinformation is actually to create this trust and the inability for people to think that something is true or isn't true, and therefore it's harder for people to make decisions, to stay unified. And that's kind of where we are right now. So we have our preset notions of things. Very few of us are willing to say, okay, let's pause for a moment, take up everything and find out where we are, and then say, therefore at this point I think this is likely, but I'm still open to be wrong about this. And then back to the thing that was mentioned earlier about, we can also shut up, and that is something which unfortunately is the problem today with social media, in the sense that, like, something big happens, your friends say something about it, we don't get posts on social media that say, this thing that's happening, I don't know what's happening about it, I need to find out more. It's never that kind of a post. It's always some sort of opinion, and almost always borrowed from somebody else.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
worse,
why don't we-
badly slapped together with the wrong images.
let me take you to the New York Times article. So it's journalist Elizabeth Spears, and she's a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. And she wrote an article titled "Posting about Israel and Palestine is not a moral obligation." Let me just take you through one of the paragraphs because it really spoke to me. So there's a facile version of taking a stand on social media that generates righteous backpatting but reduces complex issues to a simple yes or no. Taking simplistic stands can also lead to twisting words. Concern for Palestinians is portrayed as support for Hamas or hatred towards Israel or Jews in general. Anger about Hamas's deadly attacks on Israeli citizens or any mention of anti-Semitism is portrayed as denigrating the dignity of all Palestinian lives. This kind of thinking is deeply unserious and further fuels hostilities, warping nuanced positions into extremism and mistaking tweet-length expressions of outrage for brave action in the face of atrocity. And I mean, I thought that was really good. And she went on because basically she was attacked because she didn't put an opinion out there. And she said, "I don't think I should." And she goes, "It's the idea that not posting is wrong somehow, that everyone needs to speak all the time. It discourages shutting up and listening and letting the voices that matter the most be heard over the din." And one of the reasons that really spoke to me is because, you know, there's several people that I listen to for various levels of expertise that I have great respect for them. And I saw a lot of them starting to speak up about the situation, you know, as part of my 20-year mission to understand why we have religion and God in the first place. I'm a person that's very interested in the history of religion. I've been to Israel. I've been through Gaza. I've actively pursued knowledge for a long time. But I'm not an expert. I'm just interested, right? So I haven't been speaking up. And when I hear these people speaking up who speak on different topics, I just want to say, shut up. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to hear you. And you're getting in the way of me finding the people that I want to listen to. And that's, to me, has been the really big problem. It's just like, because it's like, there's nothing of value being added to the conversation from these people who only are on sort of touching the edges of it. You know, Yuval Noah, he's someone I've been listening to a lot. And I think he's been very considered and very elegant in the way he's been speaking. But there's so many people just talking, and it's really like, think about it before you go out there. Like, think about what you share. If it's something very deeply emotionally charging to you, that's a good sign to stop and really think about what it is. Is it true? If it's a video and you can't see where the source of the video is, look for it. Go and look for it, because you can find it. You know, the speed, it's the speed of everything in our lives, you know, fast food, fast fashion, fast everything, but it's also fast information. And I think the only way we can tackle it, because the providers of this information, the social media companies, aren't doing anything about it. So we've got to start taking responsibility. And what Joe was saying, you know, it's critical thinking, you know, is a skill. It's a rare skill these days, unfortunately, but it's a skill, you know. So I think the shut up. And if you don't know what you're talking about, you don't need to add to it. You don't.
I think that the problem currently is everybody's going to, you know, hustlers school and being told you got to stay relevant, you got to stay relevant, you got to stay relevant. And the trending topic of conversation is the war. So you got to talk about it to be relevant and stay in front of your followers and get new followers. And it's appalling when it's appalling when it's with pretty much exactly what you said. It's appalling when people are taking a stand based on a position that they don't know anything about, but they're saying it just to be relevant and to gain more followers. And I just think there's something horribly wrong with the economic and social media world when that is our play to try and make a few extra bucks. And I think you're basically I don't I don't really blame the social media agencies for not doing much in one sense, because their entire platform is to go speak. So in one sense. In another sense, there is a responsibility to a degree, or there's a way that they can somehow have curation. I mean, I don't quite know how, but this is where trust is going to be a big is the big currency, and it's the one that is a difficult one to find. It's where there's such a great opportunity for media agencies, not social media platforms, but media agencies, responsible journalism, to really be the curators of considered opinion. And that's where I think, from newspapers into the internet and now into the social media world, they really missed a huge opportunity to be the curators of trusted, considered opinion. And we're now they're grappling with trying to be relevant and make their sort of own model work. But yeah, I find it disgusting, the need to be, mind you, we're doing a show on the war now. So is it because we're trying to be relevant, or it is a topic of conversation and we're trying to update people with the news? It's a bit of both, really. So it's like it's there's a fine line, and some people are crossing it, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. You're more cynical. The idea of likes and followers, I kind of, I don't. It's the sense of obligation that you have to have an opinion on everything. That's what I feel is out there. So one of the other comments in that article in New York Times, she was talking about a fashion editor was saying that the fashion industry needs to make a stance. But who cares what L'Oreal or Louis Vuitton thinks?
Yep.
Why do we live in a world where that belief exists? Like,
because it's influence.
We've lost our way, right? Yeah, but we're losing our way, or we've lost our way a long time ago. But I mean, to me, I think what I really wanted to talk about today was, I mean, this is all part of the bigger story of the chaos that we've got in the world, and misinformation, the influencer model, as you were talking about, if people feeling obligated to have an opinion about things that they just don't have knowledge and or the right to share on. I think everyone. I mean, there's outrage, right? And there's babies dying. There's people who are angry about that, and we get all of that, right? But sit back, be considered. The considered opinion that you mentioned there, Joe, Cecile.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you, and I agree. What Tim has said and what you said is very relevant. And I'll go on to also saying that when the public opinion is diverted in a particular way with an aim to disrupt things, and what I'm again sort of reinforcing, that the intention goes against humanity. The intention is to create a rift. The intention is to create conflict. So when you're talking about peace, you also have to have a very good system of conflict resolution. And that is, really speaking, not existing today in the world. Particularly organizations like the UN have really failed. They've not been able to resolve conflicts at all. So conflict resolution is another issue that is not in place today, to see that things like this don't happen.
So a question to you: do you think the UN has failed, or do you think the UN hasn't been supported enough to succeed? Because I think they're two different things.
I think it's both ways. It is both ways. I think UN has not been able to exert itself. And yes, UN has also not been supported, because it is, really speaking, a collective effort of every country to chip in, if you want to have a peaceful world around you.
Yeah. All right. So sorry, Joe, did you want to add to this? before?
I was just going to say that the UN hasn't failed. It has basically done what it can given its design. It's been designed badly.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
it was relying on the higher values of a few visionary people and put into the hands of a globe that isn't quite the same in terms of its ability to do things. And the design was poor because it also it gave vetoes to certain parties, which essentially just made it, unduly influenced in what it could really try and do as well. So it's an organization that it has good intentions, but its design really teaches the countries that are involved in the processes that there are certain things that are possible, and the audacious things that you want to try and do can't be done because certain major levers are just not in your hands.
Yeah.
But Joe, I would say that it has failed in any case. Whether it failed because of the design, whether it failed because of efficiency, those are reasons why it failed. But design may be a reason, but the result is failure, and that cannot be disputed.
Yep. Yep.
Although I think Antonio Guterres is certainly trying his best to use his voice to drive positive change in the world. I really admire what he's been doing in the last few weeks and in the last few years. So another topic that I want to bring up is what happens when you allow your country to be divided. And to me, this is one of the biggest takeaways of what we are seeing in the world. And I think if we don't get this lesson, we'll be stupid. So we've got both the extreme right and the extreme left pulling us apart. And it's important that we say both. And I think what happened in Israel should be a wake-up call for everyone. So in the last 12 months, we've seen the protests right across Israel. Netanyahu's far-right push, we all know about his legal challenges. And he's also created massive mistrust in the institutions. So basically, this meant everyone's eye was off the ball, and we're seeing the outcome of what happened. And it's happening because of the extreme division in the country, as well as the eroding trust in these institutions, which without them, you can't run a country successfully. But how many other countries are in this place, allowing populism to drive a wedge through their countries? And while what's happened in Israel might not be what happens to Western countries who are equally divided, I think it's a sign that something catastrophic could happen to those countries. So, and then you combine this with the environmental impacts that we're seeing around the world: heat, extreme weather events, drought, famine, inflation. Well, I think things are going to get messy very, very soon. And if you've been studying sort of the environmental collapse that's been happening for a number of decades, and you've been looking and reading the predictions, one of them is exactly what's happening in the world right now. The breakdown of civil order, the breakdown of economies, the breakdown of nature is all part of the story. And we're sitting right now in the middle of it. And what we now have to do is say, is this the path we want to take? Because it's a path of destruction. It will just make everything happen faster. Maybe that's a good idea, I don't know. But or do we choose the other path where we come together in peace and we as a global society, and we really fight for that? Because to me, from everything I'm seeing, it's our only choice. Tim, you look like you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm glad I can convey that. I'm worried that the world can't do that, Andrea. I'm worried that with 6-7 billion people, if the environmental issues happen as fast as they think they might, there's going to be a scramble to protect what you have while others need help. And if just look at COVID. COVID told us what we're going to do. We all rushed and bought far too much toilet. Well, we didn't. But people rushed and bought far too much toilet paper than they needed to make sure that they had it, because they didn't know the other person who needed it.
Yeah,
they didn't know them. And if I don't know you, I don't care about you when it comes down to fighting for my family's toilet hygiene, for example. So that was COVID, right? And so now let's talk about mass migrations of millions of people, billions of people, because of heat, climate catastrophe, and everything else. There'll be border locking, and then there'll be attacking. I mean, actually, if you want to be really cynical, why has Russia attacked Ukraine? For the food source? I mean, maybe, I don't know, because if they've gone, yeah, this is going crap, could be. I mean, I'm just, that's okay. I retract my
Russia,
comment in one sense, but in
Russia's
another sense, huh?
Russia's okay there. They're one of the big wheat producers. So
Well,
and
if you
there's
control
and
it,
the south of Russia is basically fertile soil that the Chinese are coming in and building their
yeah,
farms
but
in. So
if you control it, you control everything.
Mm.
You control the other people's supply. You control everything. Anyway, but if you look at that side, and then it's. I guess my point is, I don't know whether the world will do what you say it's going to do. And so I think there'll be decision makers in the world thinking the same thing, that based on our behavior, we're not going to do that. Therefore, we need to arm up. And then that will be we'll be living in Cowboyville again, and just wondering, and then it'll be the powerful doing what they do. So that's a bit of a depressing view of it, which is not a happy view, which is possibly why there's this switch off mentality and go around business as usual, hoping that it's not going to happen and somebody will sort it out who's got some power and influence. And then we're back to the influence debate. Who's got the power and influence?
Yeah.
So I know that doesn't paint a pretty picture, but that's the human behavior side, until you've got some moral compass guiding you that isn't money. Because I think one of the things about the UN's failure is that its funding model means that there's and the whole way that the global the politics works from a lobbyist sort of perspective that's happening in different parts of the world. The money is talking, and it's got to be a different compass. And unfortunately, we're on a financial compass at the moment. That's the way that most people are operating. And until we shift from that to a moral compass, an ethical compass that is guided by something else other than cash, we're in a real mess. So if your 20-year quest leads you to that would be interesting. That's my sort of veiled opinion, but I mean,
no, but it's depressing as it is. I think it's realistic, and I have those conversations with people all the time. Well, we're not going to change. We're not going to do what we need to do, because this is how we do things. This is how humanity is, right? And I get that. I've accepted that, even though I don't like it. So what is required is something miraculous within the human spirit, that we transcend. You hear Carl Sagan talking about raising human consciousness. I call it raising planetary consciousness, so we get back in alignment with that which sustains us. The importance between human health and well-being and nature's health and well-being together is what we need. So do we accept, that we've read research, 30% of the population sitting in the narcissistic, sociopathic sort of will take everything until there's nothing left? But there's 70% of us who aren't like that. So is it time for us to rise, rather than just sitting back, being silent, stepping away, disengaging, which is what I'm seeing everywhere? So we do need something miraculous. But if we don't believe it's possible, we're never going to see it, right? So we need something. We need a new humanity.
Then that the message needs to be that there needs to be a political force that harbors that view.
Yeah.
Because that's something that people can get behind, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing the animosity playing out again and again and again and again. I mean,
I think politics will follow it. It won't create it.
Yeah, but
we have to create
the
it.
opportunity is to send it into the political world to get that strength.
Yeah.
But the engine is good at quashing that voice. So the
Yeah.
70% need to be very supportive. But
Yeah.
the person that's the team that's leading it needs to, because the political machine will look for any skeletons in the closet, and the social media machine will blow that up. So it's just we're in a we've created our own wall to keep us hemmed in. So we need to help, and so the only way that we're going to get past the social media history of people posting something once when they weren't considering it or whatever it is forgiveness. Is to and from a perspective of sensibleness, insofar as, yeah, I was 20 years old and stupid, and I said that or did that, or it was 10 years ago and I said that and did that, and I that is not my opinion today. And that we believe them. But then so it's a tough one, because we're looking for perfection in leaders, and they're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So we need to have that balance, and then we got to say, look, we're not perfect, and I'm not perfect, but we've got a structure in our party that if anyone goes beyond particular things or whatever, we will deal with it, and we'll deal with it properly. So then, but it's a tough one. It
is. None of this is easy.
Yep.
But moving, compassion versus cancel culture, right? We all make mistakes. We all say stupid stuff. We're all off the cuff. We're emotional beings. But Sushil and Joe, what are your thoughts on this one? The divisions.
I love this aspect of consciousness that came up. And somewhere I'm looking for a miracle, because there has to be a miracle now where maybe some thought leader, maybe some Nelson Mandela, some Mahatma Gandhi coming and creating a consciousness in the world to, to change things, like whatever people like Mother Teresa and all have done, to impact people and bring them into a peaceful state of mind. So when we talk about that consciousness, we talk about how can we change the thinking of human beings and bring them closer to the reality of being humans who can live peacefully, coexist peacefully. Along with that is the very important part of the environmental degradation that is happening, where even breathing normal, clean air has become a challenge now, and is becoming worse day by day. And that's the pity. That if we were slowly progressing, it could have been encouraging, but on the contrary, it's becoming worse, and that is again a cause of concern. So put together both the environmental issues and the anti-human results that are happening from various things, whether political or otherwise, that is a very serious concern. May not be as much for us, but certainly a lot for our children and grandchildren. They're good. For them, it's going to be very challenging.
Yeah.
So we need to leave behind a better world than what we are going to do now.
Yeah, we certainly do. And I know whereabouts are you sitting? Are you in which city in India?
I'm in Mumbai. Yeah.
All right. So at this time of year, is it a bad time for pollution?
Sorry?
Is it a bad time for pollution there in Mumbai at the moment?
Yeah, there is pollution. There has been a significant improvement. Still, the improvement is far, far slower than what it needed to be. So when we had got very clear indication somewhere in the 80s that we are getting late, we have not paid any heed to it. And today we are in 2023, and still, I know for one, my daughter has become such a activist in it, and we get when she comes to my place, she gets very violent if she sees paper being used and wastages happening and all that, plastic being used, and she gets very violent. But all that is happening very slowly. That's the issue.
Yeah. So another big issue that's obviously going to emerge from this is the impact on the global economy. And we're obviously already in a pretty bad state as far as inflation goes, cost of food, cost of basics and necessities. So that's already creating problems around the world. Joe, do you want to sort of, what are you seeing around that?
Well, I was just having this chat with my daughter actually on the way to school for an economics class, and I tried to engage her in this conversation as well. You know, the global economy is obviously going to encounter some difficulties. You know, they're going to be things that come in the way of things, but you know, historically, the one thing that really has driven economies has been war. It's
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you know, every time there was every time, you know, the economies of the world were in the doldrums, the wars that came along after that seemed to really spice things up, you know. And I you know, it's not necessarily about business as usual, but it's predictable business, as in, like, you know, in times of full scale war, for instance, industries that used to have to worry about marketing and success and things like that didn't have to, because they were repurposed for supplying a ready buying clients. So all their stocks that they were producing of the new product in the factories was being consumed by a single client who was ready to take all of it. You know, that so you had other. So business is going to find its solutions, as in business people or businesses will find their way. Washing machine manufacturers will become, you know, manufacturers of something else mechanical that is required for the war effort. But the other part that suffers, of course, during war is this general psyche, the way the minds are unable to feel secure. And so some of the things, business, definitely the world's economy is going to change in terms of its focus, right? I mean, you know, leisure is going to be something that is going to be is going to fall to the side for quite a long while. It's going to be a bit like how I think when COVID first began as well, the usual things like restaurants and dining out and those kinds of things that get pulled away. But there's also this thing about time and how time works with us. We have our initial reactions. We're going to do things a certain way, and if you look at markets and how they react to calamities, whether man-made or not, there is a predictability to the human reaction to things. We get shocked by the initial thing, and then almost like clockwork, 90 days later, we're back in swing.
You guys fruit this though.
And that actually is something that is coming. I find that we're returning back, or our reflexes now are actually even quicker than before. I mean, if you look at what happens with the markets right now, markets get affected and then they bounce back a lot quicker as well. It's going back to business as usual, and that is really about the impact that something has on you for real. So I keep thinking about the Second World War, and I keep thinking about how most people remember the Second World War in the context of the end of the Second World War, when it was everybody involved in that. And people don't really think about what happened before America was sucked into it. You know, that there was a lot of fighting going on all around the world. There were incursions everywhere. There were all kinds of things happening, but America wasn't sucked into it. And so there were a lot of people who weren't directly involved and pulled into this kind of thing. So that's currently, I think, what's happened. This whole Second World War thing that you speak about, that is, it has to be taken into context as well. It's about the amount of people, the large number of people and number of countries who were similarly uninvolved, who were similarly weren't directly affected. You know, they had to say the right things, but they weren't really materially affected by it, and therefore they stayed out of it and weren't really in it. So I think that's what happens for the environment as well. It's how people feel about that. and definitely about this thing about the war. I mean, I look at it and go like, okay, all kinds of things can happen here. We have other parties coming in. We have countries that are more sympathetic to the Palestinian political position, and they seem to be kind of getting involved as well. It could go off, but as long, I mean, this is the thing that unfortunately is the nature of man so far. We've done it over and over again. We need something really bad to happen before something really good begins to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking about how science fiction has always shown you that you know, what you want to save the environment is have civilization destroy itself. And if you look at even if you look into things like in the Middle Americas and all that, it's the same thing there as well. Their big cities in the jungle have become wonderful, thriving botanical delights when civilization of the human beings there stopped. You know, we're in the way of it. We're not always helping, and that's one of the. It's a simple part of how we are. Where we interfere with what's around us. We're opportunistic, and you know, I think there is this thing about scarcity. We think there's only going to be so much because we have had less before. And so when we arrive at the buffet table, we grab everything. And none of us are in the. This metaphor is going in the terrible direction, but none of us are in the kitchen putting things back out. You know.
Hey, I know Tim's got to run off because he's got an event to go to. Do you want to say something before you jump off, Tim?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the chat. It's a really important issue. What's going on in the world is not great. What's happening in any conflict zone, I guess one of the key messages that we seem to be talking about today is think before you tweet or post or endorse. We didn't get to talk too much about the Harvard part and what's going on there, but just, you know, think about think before you do that, but at the same time, that doesn't mean be silent. That means be considered and then voice, because it's the way the world seems to be conditioning us is that we voice our opinion quickly and then we better damn well defend it even if we're wrong. And that's not a great place to be. So we've also got to be willing to say, you know what, I was wrong about that. And I'm glad I've had the opportunity to think about it a bit more since I made that sort of rash statement, for example. But then we also need to be forgiving when somebody says that and not sort of hang them out to dry. Otherwise, we're encouraging people not to do that. So, you know, we've got to look at the human psychology part of it as well as the moral and ethical part of it. And I think the cancel culture getting into universities and corporate in such a way, from a lobbyist perspective, I think is what we're seeing in Harvard. It's just lobbyists. I don't think what the students did was right, but I don't think the way that it's been handled is right. And but it's interesting that it's had the impact it has, and I think it's something that needs to be discussed. But I think we need forums to be able to have conversations like this. Those students who sign that thing need to be able to have a conversation with people with the opposing views without coming to fisticuffs or worse. You know, when everybody's armed and you're going to have a delicate conversation, people will get shot at the end of it. They need to go in disarmed and ready to have minds change. I want my mind to be changed. I don't want to be sitting here fixed. That's what learning and the growth mindset's about. What we're encouraging is a fixed mindset. Go and read Carol Dweck's Mindset. If thinking about the way that we're thinking is, it's so challenging right now. So I love the fact that we're able to have this conversation. I love it that we're not really. I think the difference between this conversation and what we've been talking about is that we're talking about the conversation and we're not actually talking about the conflict. And I think that's the difference. And so that's what I like about where we're coming from. And and we're just encouraging people to think and be critical thinkers. But then at the same time, we're encouraging people to vote because that's, put in power people who are willing to make the decisions that may be difficult, but that need to be done, and support those people in other parts of the world that you don't have a vote for. Support them with your voice to say, but see, then we're back into the agenda politics as well. So we're in a difficult space. But anyway, actually, all of that is goodbye, because I've got to go. But
before you go, Tim, I just want to say how much I want to live in a world where more people say fisticuffs.
Yeah, we do. We need fisticuffs
instead of don't fight. No, please, this must not come to fisticuffs.
This must not come to fisticuffs. Although I do think you're a nincompoop. Please do not respond, aggressively. For example. Anyway, I bid thee farewell. I don't wish to stop the conversation because it's a really important one to continue. I shall.
Good morrow, my friend. Adieu.
Good morrow. Adieu.
We'll see you in the coming weeks if you can. Tim's going to be very busy, so it's going to be hard for him to join, but he's going to try.
I will try. Otherwise, I will be cheering you on from the sidelines, and I'll see you all again in January.
Yeah, nice. All right, good luck with all the work. Bye. All right, so I just want to, just before we sort of wrap it up, I want to talk about 3 bigger stories that are also happening at the same time. So I was talking about Yuval Harari, and so he's the author of *Sapiens*. If you haven't come across him, he's considered an intellectual. I enjoy listening to him, and I think he's been a very consistent voice in the last few weeks and talking about the challenge from an Israeli perspective, but in a very sort of balanced way. This will all be in my weekend reads. He had an interview with Rosemary Barton. I can't remember which channel. And he basically raised the reality that if the neighbors around Israel get involved in this, and Israel's dealing with tens of thousands of bombs flying into the country, that Israel will have no choice but to respond with nuclear deterrence. And, so we've gone from 1 real nuclear threat to 2 in the last 18 months. And I found this a very, very sobering assessment of the risks that we face, because until I heard him say that, I hadn't really considered that nuclear could be an option. But, in order for Israel to defend itself, it might have to become an option if the whole region erupts. Have you guys got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've heard
challenge with. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so I've heard 2-3 different perspectives of this, and everywhere the pointing out to the fact that nuclear option could be considered, and each one of them have their own reasons of compulsion to use that if nothing else is working, is something which is a very, very great serious concern. And that brings me back to Andrea's point, that are we going back to Hiroshima, or are we going back to pre-World War? And what have we done all these years to make things better if we are still sort of trying to survive in an environment like this? So that is something which is really worrying me. And I do feel that each one of us has to play a role, like what even Tim was saying, that you can't keep quiet about it. You have to put up your opinion, but also, another thought that came to my mind is that we as speakers have a greater responsibility, because we as speakers are also influencers, and we have the power of influencing people through our words. And therefore, it is important that we all get together to do something to create an influence around in the world where it becomes contagious and people do consider humanity to be more important than anything else.
Yeah. Joe?
I frankly lost my train of thought. I was trying to think about something about. Yeah, actually, I was thinking about a couple of things. One is the irony of our profession, right? As speakers, we're always informed. We're always thought of in terms of being thought leaders. I was thinking about what might help the world, but it will never happen, as many of my ideas are. What we need is social media to change the way we post It should be something where there is a button where after you hit write, it goes, instead of publish, it goes to review. And I think there is a possibility that if we have some platforms at least where review is allowed, or at least maybe a panel of reviewers who have some kind of ethical training or philosophical training. They know how to assess things a bit more accurately. We could have something interesting. I mean, basically, I'm not describing something new. It's basically what the science reviews and journals, scientific journals, medical journals, all that are about as well. But I just thought it'd be interesting if you felt that you had to defend what you say before it even gets out into the wild. So that there is a little bit of that kind of thinking, and you don't just go like, what, I really feel this is the case. This is the way this is, or I don't have any proof of this, but this is what I want to put out. And then that there's going to be a test. There's going to be a need to prove what is being said. I mean, I think maybe AI could help. I mean, AI could be part of our conversations in future. I don't know whether governments can ever come by and try and do that, but I think it would be interesting if there could be legislation of some kind that would make AI fact checking perhaps even something that's a necessity for certain things. I mean, I'm of course, as I'm saying it, and as the words leave my lips, I'm seeing all the problems that I'm creating with the solution. But it's something that we kind of need. I mean, it's an ironic world that we need to be in. We need to be in a world that is free because it is being held together by a benevolent, very powerful dictator. I think. I think we need that. We need something. We need something, some force, some person, some personality that is based on that. The 70% of the world that by nature don't care can't be the leaders. We need someone from that.
No. That wasn't. I didn't say they didn't care. I said 30% of who are the ones who are leading us down the path that we're going from an environmental and from a war perspective. The 70% are the rest of us, and we do care. But a lot of people in that 70% have just basically stepped out because they're finding it too depressing. I speak to lots of people. Their mental health is suffering. They don't want to confront the stuff that I confront every single day. They don't know how I can do it. But for me, I feel I need to do it. I need to understand what's going on. I need to make sense of what's going on because I'm a parent as well. This is my children's future. This is your children's futures, and I care, and I don't, I think humanity can rise. I think we can be better than this. There's not a lot of hope out there to back up that, but I think we can, but we've got to recognize that we've all got a role, like Sushil said, we all have a responsibility to contribute to global peace. I mean, another thing that's come up a lot, and I'll put this in the weekend reads, is racism is on the rise. So American Jews, as well as American Palestinians and the wider Muslim community in America are experiencing attacks. We saw, the young boy that was stabbed to death, a Palestinian boy in America. We saw the people in Europe. So there's racism is on the rise again in Europe. We have to wipe that out. We're all brothers and sisters here on the same planet, and we have to come together. Another big story is ethnic cleansing. So apparently a secret report was released that they're trying to get all the Palestinians in Gaza to basically leave. So what part of the bombing, people are saying, why won't they leave? Well, if they leave and cross the border into Egypt, they won't be able to get back into Palestine. So, basically what this article is saying is for the Israelis to relocate up to about 2 million people from Palestine into the Sinai, which is the Sinai Peninsula just in between Egypt and Israel. It's going to cost them between $5 to $8 billion to get them set up in tents and then build the infrastructure. Now, looking at the heat that is predicted for next year, if we put all of the Palestinians in tents, it's going to be a tragedy down the track, because they're not going to be able to cope with living in that environment with that extreme heat. But their cities are being bombed, so they've lost everything anyway. So it's not like they can rely on the air conditioning in Palestine to keep them cool when the heat comes. So, just from a weather perspective, I'm concerned for their future as well. And it's months away. It's not a long time away. Final thoughts?
I just thought about how it's a constant theme with me about how people jump into the pre-established reactions that they want to have. They have a sense of where they fall on a certain topic before something happens, and then when that triggering event happens, they instantly go into the mode that they had been, in a sense, I don't know, it's sort of rehearsing for all the time. So I really think that, for instance, the getting a bit more of a sense of what really happened before all those before you open your mouth and say something, whatever you think needs to be said. I really think people aren't spending time philosophizing. I mean, it's a very unpopular thing anyway to start with, the idea of philosophizing, but that's really what you should be thinking about. It's going like, well, from this perspective and from that perspective, and various ways of looking at things and trying to see how everything fits into place and has a perspective. I mean, I was thinking about how when you write something, it really doesn't need to go anywhere else. The writing may be part of the process, but it doesn't have to be completed with sending it out or posting it out. It doesn't have to be posted globally. It can be put into a smaller group. It can be, it's just asking yourself or putting in context, really, in terms of when you write something, is this really that important? What I've written, what I've said, is this something that deserves the air that I'm going to give it? It's hard because we're getting trained. I was thinking about our particular industry, the speaking industry, right? Our business is attention. Our business is really getting someone to look at you, listen to you, and think well of you. And as you were talking about why people want to keep expressing an opinion about things, that also is kind of the that's the learning that we've derived from marketing. We've learned that, for instance, brands that that have an opinion, take a position on things, they seem to be more successful. And so we react to that. We're actually driven by a result, which may not be to do with the actual impact of what we're saying. Where I think L'Oreal or anybody else saying anything about anything it's not about changing the world. It's about changing the sales. It's about making them like your brand. It's all for everything else except the actual thing. I mean, I think that's the real problem. We as consumers, what the problem is, we don't see through that. We don't stop and think this is because they're doing this because of that. They don't really care about this particular topic. And if we were more I guess the word is woke to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would help. Yeah.
Cecil, do you want to say anything else? I've just noticing Nara's comment about the United Nations. I think I absolutely agree, but I think we need to be very, very, very careful about constantly attacking the United Nations as failing us, because, like we were talking about before, the United Nations has been set up in a way that it's almost impossible for it to succeed. So if we really want the United Nations to lead us, we need to empower it to lead us in all ways. And that includes the financial support. It includes all the different levels of support.
I totally agree with that. And I think along with what we talk about the United Nations, I would still go strong on saying that each one of us has our little responsibility to contribute to that peaceful effort, and not just keep waiting for somebody else like UN to do it. That's surely a point. And even what Joe's talked about the design, about the structure, about the funds that they have. So they do have their limitations. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I agree that they have to be empowered before they can do it.
Yeah.
You see, another thing that comes to my mind is that when we are talking about the present conflict in Israel and Hamas, that it remains a mystery as to why Israel, which is known, like we have admired Israel always as a nation which has the best security system. There's been a metaphoric statement that is made that if you think about Israel, they know it. They already know it. That is the
Yeah.
type of intelligence system they had. But why did they fail so drastically that for the first 7 to 8 hours, they didn't even know what is going on? Their responses didn't come for about 8 hours, which was very, very surprising. It is also very, you know, the way the Hamas people have planned and implanted is something that we'll have to learn a lot from in every country. You'll have to see how does it apply to us. So I was doing a little exercise of learning about, and I was watching 2 3 discussions what the Indian army is learning from this particular conflict militarily. And one of the important things was that Hamas had, in the month of May and June, clearly indicated that there's something going to happen. That during the festival season, which is September, October, there's something going to happen. And they also talked about some new types of weapons which are not known to the world are going to be used and all that. And the only thing that they were doing was that they were pointing it all towards the West Bank. They were all talking, so the attention was being diverted to there where the plans were actually going to be unfold in the Gaza Strip. Now, this was a plan in their mind. And the beauty is that they were painting pictures to deliberately make Israel believe that something is going to happen in the West Bank and they should be prepared there. And why Israel got sucked into this, according to great military minds, they said that will remain a mystery. That why did Israel not sense it that it was coming? Why were they so
Yeah.
surprised?
Yeah.
So,
I think that's all part of the shock, right? How could this happen to Israel?
yeah, and there was certainly, like, they use a term called battle dumb. That that they were dumb. They didn't know what happened, and it took them about 8 hours to shake out of their self and realize that this is the reality, that what's happening. And then we talked about the way it is, the way this region is, it can get escalated to not only remain between Israel and Hamas. It could spread over to the other countries, whether it's Egypt, whether it's Syria, all that. And that can be a very, very dangerous thing, culminating in what you said is about the nuclear threat.
Yeah, we've got to tame it all down. So I just want to just give you some major environment news that's been happening just in the last few weeks. So I don't know if you saw Hurricane Otis made landfall in Acapulco, Mexico yesterday morning. It went from a tropical storm to a Category 5 in basically about 12 hours. It was shocking. They'd never had a Category 5 hit that coast. And they couldn't get ready for it. And some of the images are horrible. Some other headlines: we are afraid. Scientists issue new warning as world enters uncharted climate territory. And there's also Earth's vital signs worse than at any time in human history. And the other big story is West Antarctic ice sheet collapse may be unavoidable. And they're talking basically about between now and the end of this century. But what a lot of this coverage isn't talking about is the albedo effect, and that's basically with so much of the ice that's going in the Antarctic, the ocean's going to absorb more heat from the sun because there's less ice to reflect it back. One of the headlines is a once every 7.5 million years event is currently unfolding in Antarctica. To say unprecedented is not strong enough. So that's the big things that are happening from an environment perspective. But I want to talk about mass die-offs. This is also happening at the moment. So we heard a few months ago that thousands of emperor penguins died because the ice basically shredded, and they can't survive in the freezing waters until they get enough feathers on them. We also heard about the pink dolphins dying in the Amazon because it was too hot. So one article, commercial shellfish landings decline. So if you like your shellfish, this is basically because the water's too warm. Extreme ocean temperatures threaten to wipe out Caribbean coral. So we saw huge coral bleachings right across the Caribbean, and Australia's going to be facing its big die-off soon. Another one, tiny Antarctic creatures provide 8.6 billion of carbon storage via their poo. Sorry, that wasn't intentional. Basically, this is krill, and they've worked out they're much more valuable if we keep them in the ocean versus the value when we take them out. The slow death of a desert giant, which is the cacti that's dying in the Sonora Desert. These starfish face extinction. Unusual deaths of hundreds of West Coast grey whales linked to lack of Arctic ice. Billions of Alaska snow crab have starved to death because of ocean heat. Chum salmon are spawning in the Arctic. It's an ominous sign. Dominica's mountain chicken frog faces disappearance in fastest track to extinction ever recorded. These are just in the last few weeks. Mass die-offs. So when I sort of talk about we need peace, we really, really, really need peace, and we need to get focused on healing the world, regenerating the world, bringing everything back. You know, we've pushed everything so far to the brink, and when climate scientists are saying we're out of time, and some are saying now we're really out of time, I still think that if we can get the message to bring it all back, but we can't do that if we're at war. So that's what the biggest point I really wanted to get across. Joe, Cecile, do you want to wrap up and then we'll do our distractions?
I think the real challenge is always about what is the most distracting pain at any one time. You know, there's a medical principle basically that if you have you know, if even if you're having some kind of chronic pain somewhere in your body, but you just cut off your fingertip, your attention goes completely to it. And that's the biggest pain. And it may not be the biggest problem you're facing, but it's where your attention is going to go.
2 minutes.
The challenge I was thinking actually is kind of typified by the and pardon me for the role I'm going to pull up here, but basically it's about the all-seeing, all-doing mom. You know, mom needs to be running around looking and saying, I need to get this fixed, I need to get that fixed, and this is all the stuff, and then all of it needs to get done at the same time. But we're increasingly a world now where we're focused on getting the one thing done. This is what my job is. This is what I have to do. This is my priority. And when I'm done with what I have to do, I'm done. I don't have time for the rest of it. We're a very segmented society, and also economies. We're all in this little segments. We don't do everything anymore. Nobody does everything anymore. But the fact is, I think we are facing when we say the word global challenge. It's in the sense that, you know, it's global in the sense that it's about all of us as well. It's not. I'm not talking about geography. I'm talking about it's in all directions at the same time.
Yeah.
We can't just stop, for instance, this part of thing, one aspect of things, and say, okay, then the other side will take care of it. Unless we've been organized into some incredible teams that are going to do those things. I mean, people who are going to, for instance, fight to solve the problems of the environment should not be burdened with any of the other things. If we want a world that works that way, then we're going to have people who are dedicated and unencumbered by other realities like that. They should be, for instance, I mean, the idea of the UN, but applied to the environment, for instance, you know, I mean, global, not peacekeepers, but environment keepers, you know, should be able to do what they do everything they have to do, despite everything that's happening, it should be an essential activity that carries on regardless. And I think what happens right now is, no, we are taking it as a different priority, as in like it's um what needs to be done, or what needed to be done yesterday, has become a good to have the next day, especially when the attention has gone to the cut finger, you know. So that's kind of where we are. It's a lot of big boy it's a lot of big boy thinking, which is not what we've really been cut out to do. We've been turned into segmented, do your own thing, stay in your lane people. And that's why it's going to take a very special breed of person or organization or country to come along and actually try and fix things on a bigger scale.
Yeah. I don't know if we've lost Sushil, but we'll go into the last bit. Really appreciate everyone. There's been some great conversation here happening, jumping in, but it's important to be distracted and to not take ourselves too seriously, because I certainly need it. So, Joe, what have you been distracted by? What podcast
I've been
is it
taking
this
myself
week?
very seriously. You know? I've been taking myself very seriously. I tend to be one of those people who spends time learning more stuff when I have time when I have time, I'll try and learn about something else as well. So I'm going into psychology. I'm trying to figure out more about dynamics, about our family, about business, you know, and stuff like that. I did, however, I did finish off a series, an entire series. I watched Bones, which is it's not a very new show. So as you watch it, some of it might not hold up already. The earlier episodes seem to be a little bit out of touch. But it's a nice little investigative show. Bones is about an archaeologist, anthropologist, anyway, she's an anthropologist who works in the area of forensics, solving crimes and stuff like that. But it's actually kind of to put it more accurately, it's kind of like it's like Friends, except there's science involved. So that's kind of a weird way to look at it, but it is actually more about the characters, and many times I don't even remember what the murder or mystery was about, but it's that cast of characters and what they do and how they interact with each other. So there's a bit of comedy, there's a bit of treachery, but you know, it's kind of a fun ride.
All right. Well, that sounds like something I could get stuck into if I'm looking for a distraction, especially from the archaeological perspective. So I've been watching. So there's a new season of Lupin. Do you know? Have you ever watched that? It's a French series.
Yep.
And so there's a new series. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen all of it.
All right, even the recent one. Okay. And there's a couple of movies that have just come out on Netflix. One is Old Dads, and it's very inappropriate, but I found it really, really funny. And the other one is Jennifer Lawrence's movie No Hard Feelings. And that's getting some interesting coverage because there's a naked scene where she goes for it. And, of course, that's pretty much what everyone wants to talk about. But actually, it's a cool and inappropriate movie too. But if you don't mind inappropriate, which I'm a lover of, I recommend them. So Sheila, you still there? We've lost your video, but I can hear something.
Yeah, I think there's something gone wrong with the camera, and first I got locked out. So yeah, when it comes to destruction, I'm really the area I'm delving into these days is artificial intelligence, and because that's new and I'm quite fascinated by it, so I do a little bit of work on trying to. I've taken up some courses, and I'm getting into that. And that's the area I'm sort of working on besides my other work.
All right. Well, let us know if you find anything good. I haven't discovered anything that AI can do that is better than me yet. All right, guys, it's been a wide-ranging conversation. We're talking about lots and lots of different things. Really appreciate the guys that jumped in and commented. But Cecile, really happy that you came and joined us. A perfect contribution to today's discussion. So thank you. And Joe, always good to see you. Final words.
And thank you very much for getting me on this platform. I'm really honored, and I've really loved the conversation. Thank you, Joe. And of course, I'll thank Tim, who's not here right now.
Cool.
And it
All
was
right.
nice being in Singapore and meeting Joe physically in the Speakers Academy. It was good fun.
Yeah, nice. Oh, I miss all of that. Just the ability to catch up with each other. All right, guys. We'll see you in a couple of weeks with the No Show, and next week we're going to be talking about equality as part of climate courage. So Praveen Gupta is going to be joining me, who's a really fantastic writer and thought leader on this space. So looking forward to that. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. All right, bye.